This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Today's episode is sponsored by Nicole Burgess, who is an empowerment mentor. She helps the highly sensitive, the introverted, the intuitive, and/or spiritual woman in breaking free from the good girl facade and blaze her own soul-filled trail. Schedule your discovery call today. Go to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com. Now here is today's episode. Sisters, if any of you have ever identified with being a nice girl, a good girl, a people pleaser, and/or if you are an introvert, highly sensitive, or an empath, today's episode is for you. I hope that you stay to the end because there's so many tidbits and great information that Sharon shares on this episode today, and I hope you find it helpful. Well, welcome, sisters. I am so excited about today's episode. I am speaking with Sharon Martin, who is an LCSW. She's a licensed psychotherapist, a writer, speaker, and media contributor on emotional health and relationships. Her psychotherapy practice is in San Jose, California, and it specializes in helping individuals overcome codependency and perfectionism and learn to accept and love themselves. Sharon is the author of 2 ebooks. The first one is Navigating the Codependency Maze, and her other one is Setting Boundaries Without Guilt. And she writes the popular blog Happily Imperfect for psychcentral.com. And if you haven't checked that out, I would encourage you to do so. It's just a wealth of information. In today's episode, I'm really excited to talk about this because I've watched Sharon's work over the years and talked with her in different settings or in different places. And it's so much about her work with boundary setting and people-pleasing behaviors. And we're going to talk some more about her ebook, The Setting Boundaries Without Guilt, and just the wealth of information I think it can give people and has given people. And I can't wait to explore this some more. So thank you so much for being on today, Sharon.
Oh, thanks, Nicole. It's my pleasure to be here.
Would you mind sharing just a little bit with my listeners, kind of like what really got you into this work and how you seriously zoned in on the boundaries and codependency behaviors and the people-pleasing behaviors, how that really kind of came to pass or came to focus for you?
Sure. I think it just sort of naturally all started to overlap. I think both for me personally and professionally that I was kind of seeing these same issues, like you said, with the codependency and the people-pleasing and perfectionism and struggles with boundaries, that there's sort of a piece of each one that overlaps and connects with the other parts. And I think it just really struck a chord with me because those have been things that I have struggled with myself. And I'm really excited to talk with you today and also sort of bringing in the piece about being an introvert. Mm-hmm. I haven't really, dug into that piece of it as much too, but I think there's, again, sort of this interesting connection between all of those that, for those of us that are introverts and would also identify, as people pleasers and, people who struggle with boundaries, that we can see where, being an introvert just kind of adds another layer to that. Mm-hmm. It means that there are maybe particular kinds of boundaries that we need that, other people might not need. And there are particular ways that it's hard for us to set boundaries because, we're struggling with being more assertive or being around, larger groups of people or just kind of feeling overwhelmed mm-hmm. In our environment, maybe in some different kinds of ways.
Oh, I can't wait to dive more into this conversation. Would you share just a little bit, in your ebook, you talk about this people-pleasing behaviors. Could you talk more about what do you mean by that? What are some of the, behaviors or emotions that may be showing up for some of the ladies who are listening right now so they can go, oh, wait a minute, that sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah, I think we all do it to some extent. And again, there sort of becomes a line in which, it can be helpful in the sense that, we want to get along with other people, and we want approval, and we want other people to like us, and we want to fit in. And so there is sort of a normal piece, of trying to fit in with people. I think that's part of people pleasing. But, as if we do it more and more, what ends up happening is it's almost like you're kind of living your life according to what other people want you to do, or what
Yeah.
other people's values are. And I think ultimately there's really kind of a loss of self and loss of identity of who I am, and that I'm, kind of okay just as I am, rather than, me feeling like I've kind of have to live my life, for other people, making other people happy. And sometimes this can be, just very, minor little things, something like, if, your spouse, is asking you, well, what do you want for dinner? And it's always whatever you want is fine. I don't care. It's like a very minor little thing. But I think it can be sort of symptomatic of the bigger,
Mm-hmm.
the bigger problem, which is if you never have an opinion, or you're constantly afraid to speak up about something. And again, like dinner's not really for most people a very, highly emotional or controversial kind of issue. But, you can see how if that's a struggle, right, it's definitely
Yeah.
going to be harder then to speak up about things that are more vulnerable, more personal, that, feel like they're riskier to talk about.
Yeah.
Right. And so then we're just, constantly letting somebody else make the decisions for us.
Yeah, and what you're talking about, really that loss of sense of self, and to me, it's like you lose part of your soul, right? Because it's you that part keeps going further and further under, and it's
Mhm.
okay to be able to make sure you are speaking up for yourself, and there's ways to do that. And that's really what we're going to talk about today
Yeah.
regarding the
Yeah.
boundary setting of how you can stay empowered in yourself, and like, yeah, the example you gave, that's like, okay, that may be a minor one, and at the same time it can really lead to much, much bigger issues going down the road in the relationships. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Things that really speak to, I think, like our core values or our goals, the things that we, our big, hopes and dreams for ourselves, the person that you want to be and the things that you want to be doing in your life can get lost. And that's, really, I think, ultimately a very sad kind of situation that unfortunately I think a lot of people do kind of find themselves going, wow, I'm 30 years old, I'm 40 years old,
Hmm.
I'm 50 years old, and I'm not doing, anything that I'm enjoying. I don't even know what I like to do anymore.
Yeah.
I've been doing it all for the kids, or for a job I hate, or, my parents, or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah. And as you're saying, there's some earlier episodes where I had some guests on, and we were talking about really staying in your own lane, in your own path. And there's a lot
Yes.
of that, right? I have another colleague of mine that talks about like staying on your side of the sidewalk. And it's so
Yes.
true that it's like, well, I'm doing everything for so and so. And then in any of your relationships, whether that's a parent, peer, colleague, whatever, they don't get to see all of you, the true you, when
Yeah.
you've lost that part of yourself. Oh, good stuff.
Yeah, and I think it becomes really hard to take care of yourself.
Yes.
And I think, maybe that's a good, connect back, for those of us who are introverts, which is probably just about everybody listening to this podcast, is that, I think as an introvert that I have a lot of needs. Well, I guess everybody has a lot of needs. Maybe I feel like I have some different kinds of needs,
Hmm.
than
Hmm.
other people might not. I definitely know that I need, more time to myself. I need more quiet. I need to be able to set up my life in a particular way so that I can get those needs met. And again, if I'm always people pleasing and I'm overextending and I'm saying yes and I'm not setting those boundaries to give myself what I need, then I am tired
Hmm.
and I am cranky and I am unpleasant to be around. um, it's not good for me, and it's not good for the people that I am around
Yeah.
either, right? It's a lot. I think another thing is that there's a lot of resentment that
Yes.
starts to build up when I'm not taking care of myself, and that's because I'm not setting the boundaries and saying this is what I need. I'm busy. I don't feel like doing that. I'm overextended. I'm tired. Whatever. I need something else right now.
Yeah, and in your ebook, right, you talk about, or you have this space in there which I really love. It really like reflecting back, like what boundaries are kind of working for you and what problems does it cause in your life if you don't have these boundaries set up. And so
Mm-hmm.
that example you're given, I was laughing because I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, the irritability easily comes out for me if I'm overwhelmed and just my energy is zapped. It's like, I'm kind of the bear. It's like, don't be around her right now because she's not very pleasant. And if I don't pause myself and if I don't know what that is, then I can't change it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to pause and reflect and start to write down, like, oh, I'm feeling really content, or I feel more calm or at peace when I do have this space of time that I can recollect myself. So if there's big events that are going on, I know it's coming up. And at the same time, after that event, I need some downtime to be able to recharge myself. So,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to know that about yourself in order to create and or enforce boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, it takes a certain amount of, I think, sort of self-reflection, which we don't, necessarily have unless we make that time.
Mm-hmm.
Again, really to purposefully really think about what our needs are, and or what our goals are, and how we can set up our life in a way that's going to be supportive of that. But again, I think, oftentimes we just run up against that roadblock of feeling like, well, maybe this is selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I shouldn't be thinking about what I need. Maybe I should be focusing on what my kids need or my husband needs or my boss needs. And, all that people pleasing, stuff comes
Mm-hmm.
back in. And I think really we need to think, maybe sort of in the gray area of this, that it's, it can't be just one or the other. It can't just
Yes.
be me thinking about what I need all the time and disregarding everybody. That's not very realistic. Most of us do have friends and family and, other obligations and things that we need to take care of. But it can't be all about them and not about us either, right? We have
Right.
to find some space in between where taking care of myself, but I'm also identifying, the people that I'm closest to, the relationships that mean the most, or the commitments that mean the most, and how I can fulfill those in a way that, feels satisfying and not completely overwhelming to me.
And I like how you really talk about it is the gray zone, right? It's not that absolute all or nothing thinking. It's either all theirs or none of mine, or all of mine and none of theirs. There's that compromising that goes in between that. And so much of it, when we pause and do the self-reflection, which then raises our self-awareness, we are then more able to communicate that to the others in our life so that we can make these relationships truly work and they can go deeper, right? Versus, well, I'll just go along for it this time and whatever. I may be angry or irritated, but what we're saying is like preventing it to get so it doesn't get to this place of resentment, which then
Mm-hmm.
damages relationships and you can't really grow within that. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. The resentment is pretty toxic in my experience, because you're right. It's kind of like that little poison that just kind of, is under the surface a lot of the
Mhm.
times, but it kind of, gets into everything in that really nasty way. And I think that's where we find ourselves just getting really angry or really withdrawn for sort of seemingly no reason, or sort of
Mhm.
it feels like it's an overreaction. Other people wonder why we're so upset or why we're so depressed or unhappy about something. It's probably because, things have been building over time and we haven't been speaking up and we haven't been addressing things as they're going on. We haven't been setting those boundaries and asking.
Yeah. So those emotions that you're just talking about, right? The anger, or you start to withdraw, those could be kind of your like warning signs, like, hey, this is me. I need to pause and look at this. Like what's going on in my life right now, what that is causing this, and what could I do differently about it? So I love that right there can help, yeah, raise your own awareness of, oh, this is going on again and again and again. What is this about? So, what would be some, I guess, ways as women start to really recognize, okay, I know I need to set a different boundary here. Let me back it up. What stops women sometimes, especially with these people pleasing behaviors? What really stops them from setting boundaries?
Well, I think there's a whole number of things. Certainly, I think a lot of us grew up with the mindset, from our larger culture or just our families, really expecting and teaching us that we should be self-sacrificing, that either as women or as mothers or as wives, that was our role, that we should be making everybody else happy. And I think that just kind of gets ingrained in us, and you sort of lose sight of the fact that, well, maybe it doesn't have to be that way. We've just sort of been conditioned to think that way. And like any other behavior or way of thinking, the more you do it, the more you have reinforced it in yourself, right? So it just feels like it's the natural thing to do. And we, most of us are just acting and thinking on autopilot most of the time. So we're just, repeating the same things, whether they're really working for us or not, just sort of a habit. But I think the other thing is that sometimes we have had really bad experiences when we have tried to be more assertive or speak up for ourselves. And, either we've, sort of overtly been told, don't do that, that's not okay. Or hasn't been well received. Maybe it has caused problems in relationships in the past, or caused difficult emotions for us. Again, like once you sort of start to try to do something different, it often doesn't feel good in the beginning, even if you know that ultimately it's, going to be helpful for you to set these boundaries. When you start to do it, you often start to feel guilty and, worried about what other people are going to think of you, and, maybe anxious and upset about other people's reactions. And definitely there's that worry that this is going to be selfish, or, people are going to think I'm selfish, I'm going to feel selfish. That seems to be, I think something that, I hear often from people. I'm sure you do as well, that there's that fear that I'm going to go, completely 180 in the other direction, and, go from being so self-sacrificing to selfish. And I think that's probably unlikely for most of us. We're really talking about just making some incremental steps in that direction. We're not talking about, completely stopping, any, not giving any consideration to anybody else anymore.
Right. And so much what you're talking about, right? Those incremental steps is that, again, it begins the dialogue, and making sometimes those itty bitty changes really can have a big shift in everything. So yes, again, not doing the all or nothing thinking, I can either do this or not do any of it all. It's let's just make this small change and see what happens.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if you're somebody who has been struggling with boundaries in all areas of your lives, right, in your intimate relationships, your relationships with, friends or family members, at work, you might just pick one, relationship or one place to start with that. Maybe I'm going to decide I'm going to speak up about a particular issue at work more, and I'm just going to, kind of work that piece of it. It doesn't have to be I have to just start going around saying no to everyone and everything indiscriminately. Yeah, a little bit, right? And that might be the beginning place, and then you learn to do it in some other places in your life. But even if you just change that one situation at work, that still might give you enough relief, or, help you to feel just a little bit better, even if you ultimately didn't change anything else in your personal life, right? It still can be beneficial to do something.
And to me, that so much is as you said earlier, it's really shifting the mindset and doing those behaviors, right? You're taking action that it really can increase your confidence level, because you see it's oh, I did it in my professional life, or I did it here in this personal arena, wherever it is that you choose to start, that it's that internal confidence level goes up because you are brave enough to take that step. And then you see it's oh, well, that went really smooth. Or maybe there were some bumps in it and I still lived through it, that it's okay.
Yes. It's really, I think, so freeing.
Yeah.
Emotionally freeing. But I think we were talking about, just sort of recognizing what your needs are. And it just feels so different once you start to get those needs met, that it's I don't know, to me, it just sort of brings a certain amount of calm, to everything. It's just a little bit of a nice sigh to say, yes, the world didn't fall apart if I didn't, do this, and, people don't hate me,
Yes.
or if they do, I can cope with it.
Yes.
it's like, all those fears, I think you kind of realize, oh, they're not all going to come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
That was just the anxiety talking. That was that roadblock that was kind of keeping me from saying anything. But, that's not to say it's always going to go well
Mm-hmm.
when you start to set some boundaries. It's definitely hard, and it can be an adjustment for other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in some, you certainly have to know who it is you're talking about. Some people in your life will definitely struggle more with you setting boundaries than other people, but oftentimes it's not as awful as we think it's going to be. A lot of times people really can accept the boundaries, and they can accept us making changes. They just need some time to adjust to it as well, but it doesn't mean they're all going to leave us, or again, sort of all the fears that, the things that we might imagine that would go awful.
Yeah.
Most of that is not going to happen. And there can be a lot of good things. I mean, is the other thing is that, I think like you were talking about, there's great things for us, right, in getting our needs met and feeling more confident and more secure in the world. But it can be really great in relationships too. I mean, I think oftentimes people can have a newfound respect for you when you start to speak up and say, hey, this is what I think, or this is what I believe. And again, like I said, it's not always going to be a huge conflict. Sometimes there's that, wow, oh, that's really interesting. Like I've shared something different with you now. I've shared a piece of myself, and that can, help us actually connect in some new and improved ways, I think, as well.
Absolutely. And I love it that even though it may feel really scary to try these new behaviors or these new sentences, right, which is setting your boundaries, that there can be really these enormous rewards on the other side of it that you would not have known were there unless you actually did it. So, yeah.
Yes, because I think especially when we're talking about close personal relationships, like your friends and your family, they want to have a relationship with you because of who you are. And if you can, if you're not being you, I mean, the relationship is not going to go, it's not going to be very deep ultimately. So the more, I can share of who I truly am, what I'm thinking, feeling, needing, all of that stuff, then we start to have a deeper connection, I think, and understanding each other in a different kind of way.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. I think that's where the beauty of all that opens up, right? All the masks get taken off, and they get to see the full you, and you get to feel and be all of you versus hide behind something. Yeah.
But again, I know that's really scary. And I think we all have to think about these kinds of changes as a process. It's definitely not like rip it all off and stand there naked in front of everybody.
Right.
Sort of the emotional equivalent of being naked, I think. But yeah, it's just one little piece at a time, and we all can kind of adjust to that, and then we can do the next thing, and then it gets easier.
Yeah.
Just like any skill. Truly, the more that you do it, the more comfortable you become with it. But it is something you have to practice for sure.
Yeah. And, one example that you gave of a boundary, it's 2 letters, no. Right. And it sounds really simple, but in my experience with the work that I've done with so many women over the years, there is that struggle of that people pleaser comes out, and it's like, well, I can't say no to this, or I need to be involved in my child's X, Y, and Z event. And it's like, if you're already on empty, especially as an introvert, right, and you're already on empty, you're not doing yourself or anybody else any service by showing up there. And so saying no is a good thing, so that the next time something else comes up, you'll have maybe more energy to be able to participate in that.
Yeah. And I think, like for me, one of the things that I have discovered eventually, I think it took me a long time, is that I think as an introvert, there are particular strengths that I have, and particular things that are very difficult for me. Like, so when you think about, I'm just sort of thinking of the example of, if you have school-age children, you often get asked to, volunteer for a lot of different things, or there's a lot of needs, or this could be in any situation in your church or your religious group, or anything. But, there's a lot of different kinds of needs in a lot of organizations. And I had to really understand that there are certain things that would feel very uncomfortable for me that I just don't think are my skill set.
Mm-hmm.
I do not want to be, in charge of the PTA
Mm-hmm.
or, something like that. For me, that just doesn't seem like the kind of thing that I want to do the best use of my skills.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be around this large group of people. I don't want to be recruiting volunteers and, kind of doing that type of work. I feel like there are other people who are much better suited to that,
Mm-hmm.
who love that, would be energized by being around people and talking to people all the time. So anyway, for me, it was just really sort of a question of understanding that that's okay. Like that
Yes.
doesn't have to be the way that I give. There are other things, I would be much happier, stuffing the envelopes in the
Mm-hmm.
comfort of my own house,
Mm-hmm.
like that's valid too, right?
Yes.
It's maybe
Yes.
not as glamorous or as out there.
But
But
it all counts. It still
right,
helps out the organization. It still provides value to what their needs are. And it matches, like you're saying, it's like that's your skill set and it's also comfort zone. And it's a
right,
win-win.
right. And so I think if we can, sort of understand ourselves
Yeah.
better in terms of, not just being introverts, but just, generally speaking about what your interests are and what your
Mm-hmm.
skills are, then I think, when you do extend yourself to help, it ends up feeling better because it's, something that's more, in line with who you are and what you want to be doing. And it isn't so completely exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I think it's not this black and white of like, I just have to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's like, no, that's not the right thing for me, but I could do something else that wouldn't, be as taxing for me.
Yeah. Example I know you've given before too is no, not at this time, or it doesn't fit into my schedule. So sometimes it's like you're saying, it's not the black or white thinking or absolutes can't ever do this. Sometimes it's like it really just does not work for your schedule at this point in time. And that's okay. That it's like, please
Yeah.
ask me again if something else pops up, and I'm totally willing to do that, but not this time around.
Yeah, I think the other thing that can be really helpful for introverts, probably actually maybe everybody who's setting boundaries, but is to remember that you don't have to give an answer in the moment. I
Yes.
often feel like, people are just sort of coming at me
Uh-huh.
when I'm, in the middle of doing something else, overloaded, or it's a phone call or a text message, and I feel like I'm supposed to respond right away and say I can do something or not do something. And I think a lot of times we just need to, give ourselves some time to really think about whether we want to do something, whether we have time, energy, it's a good match for us, so forth. And so I think it's totally valid to just say, let me get back to you, tomorrow or next week or whatever. Most things in life are not
Yeah.
emergencies. They don't really require an on the spot commitment or answer from you. So, I think that can just be a helpful reminder to say,
Yes.
let me think about it and get back to you, because that's often what I need is I
Mm-hmm.
really need to go home and I really need to, take that inventory of how I'm feeling, what I need, look at my calendar, see what else is going on in my life before just, instinctively saying, yes, sure, I'll do that. I'll be there, right? Because we've all done that. And,
Mm-hmm.
then you regret it. And again, then we get into, I'm resentful and I'm upset with myself for doing that. And it's not a good thing for any of us.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great reminder. I was smiling because I was like, oh, yeah, that's the other, I call it simple, but it's really powerful. It's like, let me get back to you because it really is. It's like, oh, it's okay for me, even though we live kind of in this society where it's the instant gratification
It
or I think
is.
of more, I have to, right, answer right away. And it's, no, you really don't. That the answer right away is,
Exactly.
let me think about it and I'll get back to you and go from
Yes,
there.
I think it's really out of control. Especially with text messages, there's really feels like there's this expectation that I need to reply immediately and
Yes.
be interrupted from anything that I'm doing and just be on call all of the time, which is terrible, I think, for all of us. But again, as an introvert, like it really disrupts, my, you know, connection to myself and just having quiet downtime. So another thing I'll just throw out there is it's totally okay to like just turn off your phone.
Yes.
Not actually have to reply to text messages all day long. That is a particular kind of boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're saying, I mean, it's like there is no boundary anymore,
Right.
Both between like work and personal time for most of us because of, computer and phone and all of the digital stuff. But even just like in our personal lives, like we have to, as introverts, really protect, some quiet time for ourselves. And so even if you've like blocked off, a nice hour to, do something by yourself and recharge, if you've got your phone going off, that's not very restorative, for me anyway. Now you're just intruding, on my time in my, little
bubble of a space of quiet.
My little bubble.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Right. So, again, like all kinds of boundaries, people may not love it at first, but they can generally adjust to it and accept it. Mm-hmm. And depending on who that other person is, sometimes it helps to even just say to them, sometimes I just need to turn off my phone and just have some quiet. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't hear from me for an hour or two, don't worry. Mm-hmm. Right. I'm just a little slower getting back to people on text messages. And again, most people can totally get on board with that. And I think a lot of people, if you said that to them, would be like, oh, wow, I'd love to be able to do that. That's like such a great idea. So many people then will say, but I don't think I could ever do that.
And the fact is you can.
You can. And the more of us that do it, mm-hmm. then there's sort of more acceptance for it. But again, I mean, even if nobody else in your life is doing that, doesn't mean that you can't. That can be a helpful boundary for you to set. And,
correct.
Saying no to that.
I was really trying to not laugh so incredibly hard into the mic as you were saying that, Sharon, with the text messages coming through, because I think it is so mm-hmm. true. It feels very intrusive at times. It's like, oh, and that my brain will go to the same place of like, I need to respond right now. And again, you don't. There's an article that I can't tell you who wrote it or when it was written, but I've read it again. It talks about how really it's kind of like, Pavlov's experiment, where we are really trained now when our phones, which are little mini computers, when they go off, they beep, they tweet, they make whatever sort of sound. Right. We're like, ooh, here's the bell. And we start to salivate and we, instead of getting the food, we are responding to that. And so I will tell people, even if they don't want to turn their phone completely off, turn off the sounds for some of those apps or take the apps off the phone.
Yes.
So that it takes down that reactivity in your brain, like, ooh, and it changes, again, the neurons that are firing together, as we both know that, whatever fires together, wires together. It's being able to shift that by changing up what those behaviors are or what the triggering event is for that behavior.
Yes, that is so, so true.
Yeah.
Pavlov's dog. And I think if you think about it that way, I don't know, to me that just also makes me go, oh yeah, I don't want to just be a slave to my phone. Yes. I don't want to be like responding to that little bell all day long. So I don't know. I find that kind of a helpful way to think about it in terms of going, nope.
Yeah, because
I don't have to do that.
Yeah, because we're all very powerful beings. And when we, again, know ourselves really well and are able to say, I can make a different choice. I can do this differently, because you absolutely can. And even though it feels really scary, every small step that I take begins to make the changes that I'm needing and wanting in my life. And this is all part of it. So.
Yes. And I think that idea of choices is really the central point of all of this. And again, for me, it's such a powerful feeling to recognize that I have choices. Yeah. And I don't know, as crazy as it may sound, I feel like, when I was younger and growing up, I felt like I didn't have a lot of choices. And I suppose in some ways that's true. As children, mm-hmm. like you don't have as many choices as you do as an adult. And I definitely remember feeling, the power and the freedom of, having a driver's license mm-hmm. and, things like that, where you literally do have more choices. But I think just like more from the mental standpoint, of, wanting to make everybody happy all of the time, I didn't feel like I had choices of my own. It was always, everybody else making the decisions. I mean, I was going along with it, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but that didn't feel like I could do the things that I wanted to do, or that I could even see that there were other options. It was almost, sort of like there was blinders on. It was like, you know what, I'm just going to do what everybody wants me to do, the thing that's the right thing to do, the thing that's following the rule, the things that's going to, get me the reward, or, the accolade or the praise from somebody. And then once you, recognize that there's a whole lot else out there,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, like I said, like those blinders come off and you can see so much more of the world,
Yeah.
and so much more of what you can do, and so many more options for yourself. And I think that's so much of what the boundaries really come back to, is recognizing that you have choices, that
Yeah.
you can make choices to set things up in a way that are going to feel right for you.
Oh, I love that. And I know you and I could talk about this for many more hours about giving examples and how it can impact your life. And I know that we need to kind of wrap it up because we both have things going on here. So, what would be a good way for people to be able to find out more about you and your ebooks that you have to offer?
Sure. Well, my main website is livewellwithsharonmartin.com. And from there, you can find everything, the books, and you can link over to the blog that I have on Psych Central. Yeah, and you can just find out all my stuff there.
Awesome. And I will have that on the show notes as well. And I know you've got it where they can get kind of a free offer. Would you share a little bit more about what it is they could get when they sign up or when they go there? I'll give that link in there.
Sure. Yeah. So I have put a lot of things that I have created into like a resource library on my site. I think I've got like 40 or so different things in there. So there's a whole variety of stuff. Once you sign up, you can go in there, and there's worksheets, and there's some meditations, and I don't know, some journaling prompts and tips, and some interviews, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's a wealth of information in your library, and it's so fun to go in there and go, oh my gosh, look at this. And, oh, that's great information. So I'll have that link on there as well for people in the show notes. And just want to say thank you so much, Sharon, for coming on today and raising more of the awareness about what people-pleasing behavior is, how women can actually begin to break free of those behaviors and set the boundaries up in the different areas of their life so they can to take those blinders off, take the mask off, and be more of who they really are.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And yes, I hope it's helpful, and I hope everybody will just think of one small little step that they can do. That's how it all starts.
Absolutely. One step can make a big change.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Nicole.
If today's episode resonated with you and you are ready to make transformational changes in your life, to reclaim your power, your truth, and live with more ease, I invite you to schedule a 30-minute discovery call with me. Go to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/inner truth.